Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying. In this case, not lately. I thought that for something a little bit different, it would be fun to think back in time about what my favorite or formative books were from different parts of my life. And let's be honest, sometimes a little bit of nostalgia can be a pick-me-up in a time when you might need it. So please just indulge me a moment. This is going to be a short series. Been somewhat percolating in the back of my mind since I saw Dominic Reed's do something similar where he was picking his favorite books from different decades, starting from the 1980s, and then he's going to pit the top 3 of each decade together. And there was also a tag floating around a little while ago with similar type questions. And as I was talking about this with my husband, he actually had this idea, so credit to him. This short series, formative books from my childhood, like through elementary school, and then a video of about middle and high school, and then as an adult. Books that, when I think back on my childhood, what am I thinking of? So first things that come to mind, I think of things like The Babysitter's Club, but what I read more of was The Saddle Club, and I'm so sad that I don't have any of these books left, but when I did a search to double check that that's what they were called, the book covers were so vivid. Like, I remember these books. Did any of you all read the Saddle Club books? And it was about these, I think they were teenagers or maybe high schoolers. They each had a pony or a horse of some kind. They lived together. They would go on these little adventures and solve mysteries and things like that. I read those books over and over again. Another series that comes to mind is Goosebumps, specifically the choose your own adventure type. I don't know if they all were. I don't remember, but I recall trying to choose my own adventure and then getting frustrated with where I would wind up, but trying to backtrack and make different selections to come out a different way. That's about the most extreme level of creepiness that I could take as a kid. So Goosebumps and you know, similar to the show, Are You Afraid of the Dark? The ones that I read over and over the most, though, were books from the Dear America series. So these were set up like they were journal entries from girls that had lived through momentous or historic times. The main ones that I remember was The Diary of a Young Girl who came over, I think, on the Mayflower or one of those early Puritan voyages, and they were trying to eke out a life in their settlement and interacting with the indigenous people. And another one was a girl who was on the Titanic. The Titanic definitely was a theme later on in this time period because the movie had come out when I was in later elementary school. I don't remember exactly what grade I was in. There's a book called The Long Night by Diane Ho. I just had to look it up. I wish I still had this book. The cover, I will never forget how that cover looks, but unfortunately it's not in my possession anymore. I read that book so many times. Just another ill-fated romance story kind of inspired by the Titanic movie. Backing up a little bit, another series of books that I spent lots and lots of time reading were the American Girl books. I read all of them, but specifically, my American Girl doll was Felicity, so I especially enjoyed all of Felicity's stories. I always liked history, if you couldn't tell from the other books that I mentioned. I always kind of liked that American colonial history. I guess I was interested in that as a kid. Thanks, American Girl dolls. I had some of the dresses and props that came with Felicity and in her set, but also my grandma would make dresses and I would change her into that. Yes, I really loved my Felicity American Girl doll. My sister, she had Kirsten. So yeah, I had Felicity, she had Kirsten. I'm pretty sure that Felicity is in a box somewhere in my parents' storage because I don't have her in my house. I taught myself the Lord's Prayer based on the little primer that came with her toys. Yes, Felicity. And then later on in this period, that's when I started getting into Star Wars. My dad took me to the bookstore at some point and I picked the Thrawn trilogy. So Heir to the Empire, this entire trilogy. You can see how banged up they are. So I read these, and I probably didn't fully understand them being in elementary school. But then I went back and I started reading the Young Jedi Knights series. However many, there's 8, 12, 15 of those books. I had them all. I've saved them because I wanted to send them to my friends to give to their children when they were old enough. So I have them in a box somewhere so that I can send the Young Jedi Knights books to my friends for their children, even though that canon doesn't count anymore. I'll never get over it. But I have this memory. I was in 3rd grade for my birthday party. one of my friends in my class gave me this illustrated Star Wars universe, had drawn all this stuff in the front cover, and I loved reading through this book because, I mean, the illustrations, but then the history for the different locations, stuff about the different ships, and I especially recall the section on Dagobah. Anyway, so this was the beginning of me really, really loving to read Star Wars, which we will talk more about in the next era of my middle school and high school phase. But these are truly the books that, like, these are what I read as a kid in elementary school age-ish. Historical things, you know, child-appropriate historical things, except the Titanic is kind of traumatic. And Star Wars, and then stuff like Babysitter's Club and The Saddle Club, Goosebumps, things like that. I guess you can tell that I was a child in the 90s. But yeah, this was a fun exercise, thinking back on what I loved as a kid, what I read over and over and over, again, because I'm definitely a rereader. I would love to go back and get my hands on some of these books just to have them. And I would love to know what your books were from, like, these formative years in your life. What were you reading? What sort of things helped fuel your imagination? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this somewhat ridiculous video. And as always, don't forget to support your local library.